let's get started with what you are doing with Bitcoin circular economies, and what's kind of your background and overview.
Sure. So I have a few roles in the global Bitcoin space. One of them is as the coordinator for a global group called the Federation of Bitcoin Circular Economies. And when we met in El Salvador, I was there under uh, um, that sort of umbrella of work that I do. The Federation of Bitcoin Circular Economies was established about 2 years ago. There were a group of us who identified the need to help emerging and existing circular economies around the world connect with each other, share with each other, and to provide a bit of a central spot for any community that wants to start a circular economy to go and get support and get connected to other circular economies. And that's something that I had, created or established a couple of years ago after having conversations with some of the existing circular economies in El Salvador and South Africa and elsewhere, because I saw a connection between the work that they're doing and the work that I had come from doing, for 20 years in community health and development. I'd been working with community health centers around the world, which are community development projects trying to connect people with local health services and other sorts of supports, and doing local community development work to improve conditions for health and well-being in the local communities, and really helping to provide connective tissue between those organizations around the world. And as I started to see the work, really inspiring work that community health, that Bitcoin circular economies were doing, which by my count is really community development work, right? It's community development empowerment work. Noted that there wasn't enough, there wasn't much, there wasn't enough sort of connective tissue between them, so they could share lessons, learn from each other, and also not reinvent the wheel around the work that they're doing, like borrow and adapt what each other's doing. And so approached a few of them, started having conversations, and we just went from there. At this point, fast forward a couple of years, there are about 50 to 60 Bitcoin circular economies that are connected through the federation. And we bring them together every couple of months for a general assembly virtually to share updates, learn from each other, get connected, and then offline, different types of project work, based on their local needs, and helping them advance their efforts around local education, merchant adoption, and so forth.
Super interesting. It's I love circular economy so much because it promotes the medium of exchange side of things. And I just had the episode with Jeff Booth, so that's the previous one, and we talked about that, and he put it out so clear. I'm a little fearful if in pointing it so clear, but it's really encouraging to see him putting it so clear, where he says, without medium of exchange side of Bitcoin, store of value will fail of Bitcoin. We need the medium of exchange side of things. So why do you think circular economies, and this is the medium of exchange side of things for Bitcoin, is so important?
Yeah, and I think based on our local realities, we all give priority to one or the other at first. You and I living in countries like it is Austria, right? It's not Germany, it's Austria, correct?
It's a small town of Germany, so like it's
It's
Austria.
Germany,
No,
okay.
no, no, no. I made a joke, but
Right.
it's Austria. Yeah.
Austria,
So
all right.
because Austria is smaller than, for
Yeah,
example, Bavaria,
of course.
and it's a part of Germany. But yeah, it is Austria. But
Yeah,
what's the difference?
you're German. You're Germany light, just like Canada is USA light, I guess.
And I lived I lived in Germany for 2 years, in the part that is almost like Austria, Bavaria. It's very nice. But yeah, but sorry, yeah, I'm
I
Austrian.
was going to say, in Canada, Austria, Germany, United States, where we have generally functioning um, financial rails, where median income, access to employment, et cetera, are generally better. Obviously, Bitcoin as medium of exchange is not as easy for people to grasp because our currencies are stronger. Relative, yes, they're debasing, and people's purchasing power is diminishing, no doubt. But compared to something, like uh, the Kenyan shilling, or other currencies, Turkish lira, others that are debasing much more rapidly. We don't have the need for it to the extent that many other places in the world do. And so, for us, for the majority of people, the store of value is going to be the first case. Now, when you look to the majority of the world, where you have much weaker currencies that are debasing at a much faster pace, where there are all sorts of capital controls, where gaining access to banking and financial rails that allow you to save money in a third party entity, to transact digitally, are much more difficult to come by. The medium of exchange is a really powerful case, and I think it's just is evident. So I would say, starting from that, the medium of exchange value and use of Bitcoin is really filling a massive gap for much of the world. You've seen places, no doubt, and spoken to people, places, no doubt, who prior to having access to Bitcoin lived entirely on a cash basis. At a local level, if you're somewhere where you're based in a cash economy, not only is access to the currency a challenge, but there are physical safety concerns. There are concerns with, how do you, as a small business, or a household, how do you transact in ways using your local currency that, make life more manageable, et cetera, all sorts of barriers to transacting. And so, having a digital currency that anyone can hold on their phone, and, as you know, doesn't even need to be a smartphone. We have Machankura, based out of South Africa and on the African continent, and that others around the world are now using, where you can actually use a quote unquote dumb phone to transact over just a normal mobile line. I mean, this just helps people leapfrog a generation of technology, and gives them not only a better means of transacting on a peer-to-peer basis, network locally, but actually gives them access to global markets and the global community, where prior to that they were completely cut off by virtue of transacting in a local currency, that no one outside of their own borders would want. And so, for starters, it's really bringing that half or more of the planet that is entirely cut off from the rest of the world, and are scrambling for their lives, literally on a daily and weekly basis, to keep up, with the rising costs of living, which are owing to their debasing currencies by and large, just a new lease on life. And so, that medium of exchange value of Bitcoin, is incredibly powerful for that, you know, half or more of the world's population, just for starters. Second of all, I mean, I think even for those of us living in countries with more quote unquote developed financial rails, banking systems, monetary policy, government management of finances that isn't as terrible as it is in many other places of the world, that medium of exchange still gives us a tremendous amount of power, right? And I think it also helps us to connect to the rest of the world in places um, that previously weren't possible, or where there were, significant barriers. And so just providing that connectivity to the rest of the world and being part of a global movement is really, people can remit money now to family members around the world. People can purchase items for family around the world through Bitcoin. And I think it enables us also to take back more control of our lives and to engage in peer-to-peer local economies here in ways that support small businesses, that support, independent, regenerative local farmers, that enable us to claw back some of the power from major corporations that have squeezed out smaller businesses, often in concert with governments whose regulation or lack of regulation have really um, given power to larger entities. So I think those are just a few of the ways that the use of Bitcoin as money, um, really, the people's money, gives back power to everyday people, to families, to local communities, obviously with different priorities, different senses of urgency from one location to the next around the world, but really shifts the power back towards us, everyday people.
Super interesting, the social and the cultural impact that also Bitcoin will have on us. And I'm often wondering like how this long term will actually impact. You already gave some kind of insights that the power shifts back to us and to the individual. What do you think is the impact of having peer-to-peer cash with Bitcoin on a cultural or social layer for humanity?
Yeah, I mean, still early days. But I think Bitcoin, period, because it is a final settlement or bearer asset, because uh, one, unless one is using like a custodied service, one really has to be accountable for one's own wallet, one's keys, etc. It really does increase, the prioritize, personal responsibility and ownership of one's personal finances, and for a group, perhaps the group's finances, etc. And I think that causes a cognitive shift for people, and it is a gateway to people actually exploring, autonomy, sovereignty, responsibility for self in many other ways. So I think that there's a powerful sort of fundamental value of Bitcoin in that sense. Um, in addition to that, I mean, the idea of exchanging peer to peer, it puts us back in touch with each other, and it I think it causes us to engage and re-engage in ways uh, that aren't strictly like functional. The way you go into a big store and or transact online, and you don't really have a personal connection to the person you're engaging with, the person who's providing you your meat or your produce or your other good or service. In the fiat world, I find things have become much more transactional and functional. Um, and this might just be a product of how early we are with Bitcoin, and the fact that there's a countercultural or subcultural element to using Bitcoin on a peer-to-peer basis still in much of the world. But there's a different quality to our engagement with each other on a peer-to-peer basis. I think so. I've experienced, and I've heard, secondhand from a lot of people, just how there's just a different quality to the type of engagement you have when you're paying someone for a service, when you're buying a good or service from them in many respects. So I think it does sort of help to renew some of our connections with each other. Now, that will not persist if if and once we go to scale with using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, and it's ubiquitous, and you're using Bitcoin everywhere on a daily basis. That's a function of just where we are in terms of the adoption curve and use of Bitcoin as money. But at this point, and at a point in time when we live in a world that is just like so divisive, when there's such systemic change and structural change at a macroeconomic, geopolitical level, at the level of society, where people are pulled apart from each other through sort of toxic tribal political narratives, and the gravitational pull of political parties, etc. I think there's something powerful about re-engaging each other on a peer-to-peer basis, and just that sort of level of human contact it provides. Maybe I might be I might be thinking wishfully of that, because I'd like to see more constructive social dialogue and engagement and whatnot. But I think it does help to kind of restore some you know nicer quality to our engagements with each other.
I do think so too, and I'm not in the camp that says Bitcoin will fix everything, because I think there are just things that Bitcoin maybe touches, but it's not fully integrated. But one thing that Bitcoin actually does is it gives us the trust back in the money that we use, because most people actually don't invest. they just have the fiat money. And if the fundamental basis of your life and your money is broken, you have a big distrust in the system. And then you also have a big distrust in your life in general. So I think the disconnect between people is not only because of money, but money is a big contribution point to that. And if we can trust back in our money, I think the trust slowly can come back. There's a room of that coming back. There are other factors why we are more devised. I mean, a lot of time I also think in real life we are not as divided as it sometimes is portrayed on social media or TV.
Yeah.
So I do see that when I go to the family gatherings, when I go out with friends, people are not so divided, but also I'm in a small bubble. So we are all like, even if you have a lot of friends and people that you know, how many can you really know? Like 100 people, maybe 200. Like that's a very small bubble. That has like 8 billion people. So that's like, even if you know a lot, you don't know a lot of people.
I mean, one of the things that I argue, and this is shifting a little bit more to the work that I do in Canada and my observations of the United States and elsewhere, we see these, these uh, social, economic, cultural divides, and this sort of the way that Bitcoin often gets caught in the middle of these partisan, tribal, um, divides. Having been part of that and coming from a particular, I guess ideological, political, philosophical background, myself for 20, 30 years, which has shifted, and to a certain extent due to Bitcoin. But observing these divides, and then getting to know people better. What appears on the surface to be a very real divide is actually misunderstanding. It's actually people using coded language and talking across each other and making large assumptions, and assigning certain beliefs and assumed values and ideologies to the person on the other side or the group on the other side of that supposed divide. When you actually get to know them, they're actually closer together than appears on the surface, right? It's a disconnect due to broken language,